The first sound wasn't a roar. It was a quiet decision made inside Chrysler engineering offices in the late 1960s. While Ford and Chevrolet were chasing magazine headlines with ever bigger horsepower numbers, Chrysler's engineers were working on something far less glamorous. They weren't trying to build the loudest small-block V8 in America. They were trying to build one that could survive. Almost nobody noticed. Today, when enthusiasts talk about legendary American small blocks, the same names always come up. Chevrolet's 350, Ford's 302, maybe the Boss 302 or the 351 Windsor. But tucked away in the shadows was an engine that quietly powered everything from family station wagons to tire-smoking muscle cars, from hard-working pickup trucks to championship-winning race cars. The Chrysler LA 360. Most people think they know this engine. They picture an old Dodge truck with faded paint or a dusty Plymouth sitting behind a barn. Reliable, simple, nothing special. But what almost nobody knows is that beneath those ordinary valve covers was one of the smartest engineered small block V8s America ever produced. An engine that outlived rivals, adapted to changing regulations, and developed a reputation for producing massive torque with almost unbelievable durability. And the strangest part? For decades, it barely received the respect it deserved. To understand why, you have to go back to one of the most chaotic periods in Detroit history. The late 1960s were unlike anything the American auto industry had ever seen. Every manufacturer was locked in an escalating horsepower war. Chevrolet had its growing family of small blocks. Ford was refining its Windsor and Cleveland engines. Chrysler already had powerful options, including the mighty 426 Hemi and the legendary 440 Magnum, but those big blocks were heavy, expensive, and increasingly difficult to justify as emissions rules loomed. Engineers knew something had to change. The answer wasn't to build another monster, it was to build something smarter. Back in 1964, Chrysler introduced the LA Series small block family. The initials stood for Light A, a lighter evolution of the older A Series V8. It began with the 273 cubic inch version, before expanding into the popular 318 and the high-performance 340. The 318 became famous for reliability, earning a reputation as one of the toughest everyday V8s ever built. The 340 turned into a street fighter, revving eagerly with impressive horsepower. But by the end of the decade, Chrysler saw a problem. The 340 was fantastic at high RPM, yet expensive to manufacture. Customers still wanted performance, but they also wanted engines that could pull heavy loads, idle smoothly, and survive hundreds of thousands of miles. That required a different philosophy. Instead of chasing maximum horsepower, Chrysler began chasing usable power, and that's where the 360 story truly begins. When development started around 1970, engineers weren't trying to replace the legendary 340 with something faster. They wanted an engine that produced stronger low-end torque while remaining affordable enough to install across multiple vehicle lines. The new engine kept the familiar LA architecture, but introduced significant internal differences. Its displacement grew to 360 cubic inches, thanks to a 4.00-inch bore paired with a longer 3.58-inch stroke. Compare that with the 340's 4.04-inch bore and shorter 3.31-inch stroke, and the strategy becomes obvious. The 340 loved high RPM. The 360 loved pulling. That extra stroke increased piston travel, giving the crankshaft greater leverage. The result wasn't necessarily breathtaking horsepower, but something drivers actually used every day. Lots of it. Early versions produced around 175 to 255 net horsepower, depending on application, but torque ranged from roughly 285 to well over 340 pound-feet. Those numbers made the engine exceptionally flexible. Whether it lived inside a Dodge Dart, a Plymouth Fury, a Ram Charger, or a half-ton pickup, most people never appreciated that difference. Horsepower wins advertisements. Torque wins real life. Unlike the smaller 318 and 340, the 360 used externally balanced rotating components. Rather than making the crankshaft excessively large and expensive, Chrysler engineers added offset weights to the harmonic damper and torque converter or flywheel. Some enthusiasts criticized the design, but externally balancing the engine reduced manufacturing costs while maintaining smooth operation. It wasn't glamorous engineering, it was practical engineering. Early 360S featured large combustion chambers, helping achieve compression ratios near 8.7, one as emissions regulations began lowering compression across Detroit. Lower compression meant less peak horsepower, but it also reduced detonation, improved reliability, and allowed the engine to run on increasingly common unleaded gasoline. Chrysler wasn't building yesterday's hero, it was preparing for tomorrow's survivor. As the 1970s unfolded, new federal emissions standards tightened almost every year. Compression ratios dropped, camshafts became milder, catalytic converters arrived, horsepower figures seemed to collapse across every manufacturer. On paper, it looked like the golden age was over. Critics saw the lower horsepower ratings and assumed Chrysler had taken a step backward, but they were looking at the wrong numbers. Out on real roads, where trucks hauled trailers, police cruisers chased suspects, and families crossed thousands of interstate miles, the LA 360 kept proving itself. It started easily, it ran cool, it produced broad, predictable torque, and perhaps most importantly, it refused to die. Mechanics began noticing something interesting. Engines that had spent years hauling campers and towing boats often came into the shop with remarkable internal condition. Bottom-end failures remained relatively uncommon with regular oil changes. One veteran Chrysler technician reportedly joked, "You could wear out the truck before you wore out the 360. It wasn't entirely an exaggeration, but durability alone wouldn't turn the LA 360 into a legend, because hidden beneath its dependable reputation was a performance potential that Chrysler itself had barely begun to unlock. By the mid-1970s, the muscle car era looked finished. The LA 360 entered the market at exactly the wrong time, or so everyone thought. In reality, Chrysler engineers had accidentally created an engine with enormous untapped potential. The thick cast iron block, generous main-bearing bulkheads, and sturdy bottom end gave builders a foundation that could tolerate far more abuse than Chrysler was officially asking of it. Most people judged the engine by its brochure. The smart racers judged it by its block. One of the LA 360's greatest strengths was something most drivers never even knew existed. Chrysler gave the engine larger 2.810-inch main journals than the 318 and 340. The increased journal diameter added rigidity to the crankshaft while helping distribute loads more evenly across the bottom end. The 340 had been a high-revving athlete. The 360 was built like a heavyweight boxer. Its factory hydraulic camshafts were conservative, allowing smooth idle quality and dependable vacuum for power brakes. Even the four-barrel versions emphasized mid-range pulling power over screaming top-end horsepower. On paper, that sounded boring. Behind the wheel, it felt completely different. Press the throttle at 2,000 revolutions per minute, and the car didn't need to downshift immediately. It simply leaned into its torque curve and pulled with surprising authority. Drivers noticed, mechanics noticed, racers noticed too. Most production 360S left the assembly line with relatively mild intake manifolds and carburetor calibrations designed around emissions compliance. Depending on the application, Chrysler installed either a 2-barrel carburetor or a Carter Thermoquad 4-barrel. The Thermoquad was one of the most misunderstood carburetors of its era. Unlike traditional all-metal carburetors, it used a lightweight phenolic resin center body that dramatically reduced heat transfer from the intake manifold into the fuel, helping prevent vapor lock. When properly tuned, the Thermoquad flowed as much as 800 cubic feet per minute. The tiny primary throttle bores provided excellent fuel economy during normal driving, while the huge vacuum-operated secondary barrels opened only when the driver demanded full power. Unfortunately, years of neglect gave the Thermoquad an unfair reputation. Many owners replaced them with aftermarket carburetors that actually reduced performance. The original design had been remarkably advanced. People simply didn't understand it. The cylinder heads weren't nearly as glamorous as the legendary X heads used on the 340, but they responded incredibly well to port work. Engine builders soon realized that mildly ported factory iron heads, paired with a performance camshaft and quality intake manifold, could unlock horsepower numbers Chrysler never advertised. Suddenly, those supposedly boring truck engines were producing well over 350 horsepower while maintaining excellent street manners. Some pushed beyond 400 on stock blocks. The aftermarket noticed. Companies began offering aluminum intake manifolds, high-lift camshafts, forged pistons, and stronger valve springs specifically for the LA 360. Builders discovered that the engine loved breathing improvements. One veteran Mopar engine builder reportedly joked, "A Chevy 350 asks for RPM, a 360 asks for airflow." Like many American V8s of the era, the LA Series lubrication system wasn't flawless under sustained high RPM racing conditions. For ordinary street driving, nobody noticed. For circle track racers running hundreds of laps, it became a concern. Fortunately, experienced racers found solutions. Improved oil pans, windage trays, high-volume oil pumps, and careful enlarging of oil drainback passages helped oil return to the crankcase faster. A properly prepared LA 360 became astonishingly durable. And then came the proving ground that mattered most: police fleets. Throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Dodge equipped many law enforcement vehicles with 4-barrel versions of the 360. Pursuit cars spent hours idling, then instantly accelerated to triple-digit speeds before returning to idle again. The LA 360 thrived there. Fleet mechanics consistently praised its cooling system, predictable maintenance requirements, and impressive longevity. Engines routinely accumulated well over 150,000 miles, despite lives filled with full-throttle acceleration and extended idle time. The same story unfolded in Chrysler's truck division. Installed in Dodge D-Series pickups, Ram Chargers, and vans, the engine became known as a workhorse, capable of towing heavy trailers day after day. Owners discovered something almost unbelievable. These engines just kept going. 200,000 miles became common. 300,000 wasn't unheard of with regular maintenance. That reputation spread quietly across North America. Farmers trusted them. Contractors trusted them. People who depended on their trucks every day didn't care about magazine dyno charts. They cared whether the engine started at 5 in the morning. The LA 360 almost always did. But perhaps its biggest surprise came from the drag strip. Grassroots racers realized they could buy used 360 engines for a fraction of the cost of more famous performance V8s. Junkyards were full of them. Builders installed forged pistons to raise compression, added aggressive camshafts, upgraded to high-flow intake manifolds, and bolted on larger headers. The results shocked competitors. Quarter-mile times dropped into the 12-second range with relatively modest budgets. More serious builds broke into the 11S. With careful tuning, race-prepared combinations exceeded 450 horsepower while still using factory-based blocks. For an engine dismissed as a smog-era truck motor, those numbers were almost embarrassing to its critics. Yet despite everything it could do, the LA 360 still lived in the shadow of Chevrolet's legendary 350. Why? Because Chevrolet had one advantage Chrysler never matched: numbers. GM produced millions upon millions of small-block Chevrolets, creating an aftermarket ecosystem unlike anything else. Every speed shop stocked Chevy parts. Every magazine tested Chevy combinations. The Mopar crowd remained smaller, more loyal, almost stubbornly so. They knew something outsiders didn't. Horsepower wasn't the only measure of greatness. Sometimes the engine that quietly survives decade after decade is the one that deserves the most respect. But Chrysler wasn't finished with the 360 yet. The LA 360 could have quietly disappeared. Many engines from the muscle car era did. By the late 1980s, Detroit was moving toward electronic fuel injection, tighter emission standards, and increasingly sophisticated engine management systems. Carburetors were becoming relics. It seemed inevitable that Chrysler's aging LA Series V8 would finally reach the end of the road. But that's not what happened. Instead of throwing the engine away, Chrysler gave it one last evolution. Beginning in the early 1990s, the 360 was updated with electronic fuel injection in Chrysler's Magnum engine family. While enthusiasts often refer to it simply as the Magnum 360, the engine still carried much of its LA DNA. The real magic happened upstairs. Engineers completely redesigned the cylinder heads with higher swirl combustion chambers and significantly improved intake ports. Larger valves combined with more efficient port geometry to increase airflow without sacrificing low-speed velocity. Electronic multi-port fuel injection replaced the old carburetor, allowing the engine computer to meter fuel with remarkable precision. Cold starts became effortless, fuel economy improved, throttle response sharpened, and despite stricter regulations, the engine actually became more enjoyable to drive. Horsepower climbed to around 245 horsepower in many truck applications, while torque reached an impressive 335 pound-feet. This was a heavy-duty truck engine designed to tow, haul, idle for hours, and survive hundreds of thousands of miles. There was a reason Dodge Ram sales exploded during the 1990s. The engines underneath the hood had a lot to do with it, but there was one challenge Chrysler never completely solved: the factory intake plenum gasket. The Magnum's intake manifold used a steel belly pan sealed by a relatively thin gasket. Over time, repeated heat cycles could cause that gasket to fail, pulling oil directly into the intake manifold. Owners began noticing mysterious oil consumption. Spark plugs fouled unexpectedly. Many drivers blamed worn piston rings. In reality, countless engines simply needed a revised intake gasket. Fortunately, the solution was straightforward. Updated gasket materials and aftermarket aluminum replacements virtually eliminated the problem. It was one of the few recurring weaknesses in an otherwise remarkably durable design. Then came another turning point. The aftermarket exploded. As the internet connected Mopar enthusiasts worldwide, builders began sharing dyno results and tuning strategies. Companies introduced stroker kits that increased displacement from 360 cubic inches to 390, 402, or even 408 cubic inches. Suddenly, the quiet workhorse was becoming a monster. A well-built 408 stroker could easily produce over 500 naturally aspirated horsepower while delivering more than 500 pound-feet of torque. Some turbocharged and supercharged combinations pushed beyond 700 horsepower. The block that once powered family station wagons was suddenly embarrassing modern performance cars. Racing communities noticed too. Circle track racers continued relying on the LA platform because of its predictable handling and broad torque curve. Off-road racers appreciated its simplicity and durability. Drag racers found that the 360's longer stroke launched heavy cars aggressively off the starting line. Even today, you'll find LA-based engines powering everything from restored Dodge Darts and Plymouth Dusters to rock crawlers, vintage race cars, and purpose-built street machines. That versatility is part of its legacy. Ironically, the engine's greatest strength also became the reason it was overlooked. The Chevrolet 350 became famous because it was everywhere. The Ford 302 became famous because of Mustang culture. The Chrysler 360 quietly worked. It hauled trailers, it carried families, it chased suspects, it crossed deserts, it won local races. It survived neglect that would have destroyed many other engines. It didn't need headlines, it earned respect 1 mile at a time. Production of the LA-based 360 eventually came to an end in 2002, as Chrysler transitioned to newer engine families and the Hemi V8 returned to the spotlight. The automotive world moved toward overhead cams, variable valve timing, and increasingly complex electronics. On paper, the LA 360 had become obsolete. In reality, it had become legendary. Today, clean original-powered Mopars, equipped with factory 360S, continue attracting collectors who appreciate authenticity over hype. Modern aluminum cylinder heads, EFI conversions, roller valvetrains, and stroker kits allow builders to create engines that Chrysler engineers of the 1970s could scarcely have imagined. Yet many enthusiasts still prefer the original formula: a cast-iron block, a simple hydraulic cam, a 4-barrel carburetor, a deep V8 rumble, and enough torque to leave 2 black stripes stretching down the road. Maybe that's why the LA 360 continues to earn new fans more than 50 years after its introduction. It represents an era when engineering wasn't always about chasing the biggest number on a dyno sheet. Sometimes it was about balance, durability, serviceability, real-world performance. Its 4.00-inch bore and 3.58-inch stroke created a torque curve that suited everything from muscle cars to work trucks. Its rugged cast iron construction tolerated decades of abuse. Its simple pushrod valvetrain made repairs inexpensive, and its incredible aftermarket potential proved there had always been far more performance hiding beneath the surface than the factory ever advertised. That's why so many Mopar enthusiasts smile when someone calls it just a truck engine, because they know better. They know that underneath those valve covers is one of Detroit's greatest engineering success stories, a V8 that quietly outlasted trends, survived changing regulations, and earned its reputation through reliability rather than marketing. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest engine isn't the one that makes the loudest entrance. It's the one that's still running after everyone else has gone home. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Chrysler LA 360, let me know in the comments which underrated American engine deserves the spotlight next. There are countless forgotten masterpieces hiding in automotive history, and each one has a story worth telling. And if you don't want to miss the next documentary-style journey into the machines that shaped the automotive world, make sure to subscribe. Because sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones history almost forgot.